Good morning from Hoi An. It is Colin Clapp from Parenting Passports and Profits, and it is Worldschooling Wednesday. Welcome wherever you are in the world. So today I wanted to talk about child-led learning, what it's meant to us, and our experience of it. It took us a while. I guess this follows on from last week. So if you saw last week's Worldschooling Wednesday live, I talked about, do you trust your kids? And that is in keeping with a unschooling philosophy and a world schooling philosophy where a lot of trust has to be placed in your child to let them flourish and trust that they will flourish regardless of the learning environment, and trusting in yourself that you don't have to have all the answers. You just have to nurture the environment for the child to learn. So the child-led thing is something that not everyone is comfortable with, and I guess it's practiced at different levels by different people depending on how comfortable they are and how old their children are. So I think it's wise and prudent that I put a caveat to our situation, because our eldest is 5, maybe 5 1/3, 5 1/4. Our youngest is a newborn. So we don't even have either of them at school, official school age in New Zealand, where exemption starts at 6. But the second caveat to that is that in our own mind, in our mindset, and the way we approach development or child development, is that we've seen ourselves as her teacher. I'm talking, so when I say we, I'm really obviously talking about our eldest. And because we'd mentally committed to homeschooling before our little one was even born, we have seen ourselves as her teacher from day one. And that obviously impacts how you treat the child. And so we've looked for learning opportunities from the moment she's born, and I'm sure all parents do. The only difference I'm saying is ours is very intentional and very conscious, because we know that she's not going into a formal study environment. So anyway, so we've always just been looking for little Mrs. Q's. And when our journey evolved to unschooling and then world schooling, we just strengthened our commitment to seeing those cues and fostering what she would like to learn. So there's another little bit of background that's probably quite useful to pitch in, and that is early on in Ayla's life, we looked into things a little bit more and came across the Steiner schools, and we dived into their philosophies a little bit and researched that. And that was something. There was a Steiner school in Christchurch, which was where we were living when Ayla was born, and we did visit there, and we really liked what it had to offer. There was a wait list. We put our name down, but we weren't sure whether we would want to use it. And as things came to pass, that didn't happen. But without being a guru in this space or anything like that, or being totally wrapped into it, the rough philosophy that I took home was that Steiner pretty much sort of, and I'll stand corrected on this, I'm not trying to say this is exactly as it is, but this is my interpretation. That Steiner sees the period 0 to 7 as for play, play-based learning, child-led learning. I probably should have said that I kind of partly see them as one and the same, certainly at this age. Then from 7 to 14, that's when if there is a shift, there's a shift between 7 to 14 where the there's more an educational focus as opposed to a play focus. And from 14 to 21, that is where you nurture the emotional intelligence. Now, that's not to say none of those things can be nurtured at an earlier stage, and we certainly are. And we're conscious with a lot of the adult type stuff, the soft stuff, that she might not be ready for it. But that's our philosophy, is that we've seen that she's not ready for anything. But you plant some seeds and you just pour water on them and just see how she responds. So play-based learning is very much at the heart of how we function right now, and will be until Ayla at least turns 7, by which time her little sister will be 2, and she can take the job of chief play officer in our family, and Ayla maybe can become the chief learning officer. And those are just a couple of terms we use inside the family. Anyway, so how has this worked in reality for little Miss, bearing in mind that she has not been in any formal school arrangement? So a couple of examples are reading. Reading would be the biggest one for us. We read to her a lot when she was younger. No strategy behind that, just books were around. I'm talking children's books. Books were around. We would pick them up. We would read them to her. And when she was about 2, we noticed that she was picking up the books herself, and she was reading them back to us verbatim. They just all come out of her memory. Somehow she knew if you missed a word. And this was not encouraged or fostered in any way. This just happened very naturally. And since then, all we've done is just kept books around her. We got rid of all of our books because we wanted to be totally paperless. We've got rid of our books, and she's continued to have books around her, and we haven't pushed it. And then what happened was you could tell that she wanted to read more, and so then we just went through a little phase of some phonetics. You're just sounding out letters and parts of words, trying to differentiate, between like what we called the C in Colin and the C in Pacific, or sorry, the first C in Pacific. So Colin, or the first C in Pacific, we describe as soft, and the C at the end we would describe as hard. I mean, that's about as intuitive as it got for us, and it was enough to get her through the alphabet and make out some sounds. And I don't know, this only seemed to last a few weeks, and then she was moving on to different books and picking them up and just reading them. And she'd stutter through a few words, and she'd ask for a few help on a few words, but not much. And then because she taught herself how to do the sounds, etc., etc. Anyway, that was probably about a year ago, 6 months to a year ago, and now she's just evolved that and just is reading more books. And I can tell when she's if she sees a word she doesn't understand, she just kind of goes over it. It doesn't stop her reading, and I don't interrupt her flow. Certainly not at night time. Maybe during the day I would pause and give her. I'd give her feedback that said, I didn't quite understand what you were saying. Could you repeat that? And that might lead to wanting to learn that word. So it's very facilitational rather than, oh no, stop, get this. I'm very conscious. I don't want to take away her joy of reading the book, however she's making it up. So, and she can read books from front to back now, and she reads to us, she reads to her little sister now, and she reads on her own. So, and we'll just keep putting books around her. So the second example was swimming. So she She was born in the water. She went swimming when she was 6 months, sort of lessons, had got used to the water. So I'd always been close to the water. Uh, um, but the swimming lessons when we lived in Christchurch were sort of ad hoc. We'd sign up for a term and then something would get in the way. We'd miss a term, then we'd go back. So in her early years, she wasn't like there every week, but she was doing the splashing around and having some fun. So we knew there was no fear of water. When she got to about when she got to just before 3, maybe just turned 3, not long before we left New Zealand, she hadn't embraced the sea much, but we had some paddle time down at the sea a few days, and it seemed like she was getting used to that. But she definitely could not swim or hold her own or anything like that. All we knew was that she wasn't afraid of water. She was happy to play around water, so that was good. And then when we arrived in Malaysia, so she would be about 3 1/4, we ended up in a apartment complex that had a pool. And you know, the tropics, it's hot here, and having a pool was just a good place to cool off and for the family to hang out. But having access to this pool day in, day out allowed us to just literally be in the water with Ayla and facilitate her confidence. And, you know, we're not swimming instructors or teachers or anything like that. We just held her, and just naturally she eventually was just going, can I do this bit on my own? And she was kicking and keeping herself afloat. And by the time she was 3 1/2, she could swim from side to side. And this was only because she wanted to, not because we told her to or anything like that. And I confess, the swimming thing, seeing her able to keep herself afloat and propel herself from one side to the other, just subconsciously was a big weight off of my mind. And we don't have access to a pool. We had that for about 12 months, maybe a little bit less. And it's been a bit ad hoc since then. But now we're not afraid of her just jumping in the water and looking after herself. Obviously, we don't abandon her, and we always make sure there's adults around, but we certainly don't feel frightened that she's going to struggle. We just need to make sure that she doesn't get into any difficulties if kids start, jumping on each other, those sorts of things. So those were 2 examples that were play-led, they were child-led. We didn't try to teach her swimming. We didn't try to teach her read. She had a strong curiosity to do those, and we just facilitated it. So how do we cope with pushback and deal with when it's not going quite so well? So I'll give you an example. So we have done our best to avoid screen time. I'm not saying we're not anal about this or anything like this, but Ayla, she doesn't have her own devices, and we really try to work hard to make sure she's not touching our devices, and she's certainly not allowed to have them on her own. We only recently let her use an old mobile phone just to see how she coped with touching buttons and stuff like that, and to sort of give her a sense of ownership. But there's no wireless, there's no Wi-Fi, there's no games or anything. We told her it's a mini computer, and it was more about could she take photos and things like that, because she saw her mum and dad doing that. So she's not been exposed to Wi-Fi and data or anything like that. She's not been exposed to games. This is a little mini computer you've got, and you can learn how to handle technology and the frustrations that come with technology, and that was the angle. And the camera and the image on it's really bad, so she gets bored with it pretty quick, so it doesn't facilitate a lot of screen time, which is happy days. Anyway, one exception to that came about when we were in Bali, and we discovered while we were in Bali, there was quite a lot of French-speaking children. Quite a lot of French-speaking people. Now, I was, although I'm a New Zealander, I was actually born in the UK, raised in the UK, and went to school in the UK and had French lessons when I was in my early years. And I've always been surprised by how much of that French vocabulary is still in my head. So I would, whenever I find myself in a French environment, I'm always coming out with the vocabulary. Now, it's about the vocabulary. I don't actually speak French. I don't understand much of it, and I only have a few words, but they come out, and I'm always willing to try. So that kind of spilled over to Little Miss, that she wanted to try. So we downloaded the Duolingo app to the iPad, which allows you to learn words on the iPad. And I would sit with her, and she would attempt to listen and speak some few words of French. Now, what I found, I was very excited that she wanted to do this, and that was like how that is good iPad time. You know, if she wants to learn a language, Ellie and I can't teach her languages, so let's use the technology as it's available. So I would allow the iPad, and we would go for it. So, but what happened was she'd have these bursts of enthusiasm, and then I'd be getting into it, and she would hit like a bit of a wall where she can't keep up with the pronunciation, or it was confusing, or she was tired out, and I could feel my frustration growing, and I could feel her frustration growing. And a couple of times it wasn't pleasant. I didn't enjoy it. Didn't go too badly, but I was like, yeah. And then I had sort of observed that in myself, and had to take a step back and recognise that this is all about play. This is child-led. There's no obligation for her to be doing this, etc., etc. And all we did was we just worked out a little signal that at any time she would just say something like, "I've had enough, Daddy," and she didn't have to explain why she'd had enough, and I didn't have to pursue why she'd had enough. It was just her being emotionally intelligent enough to go, that's enough. I'm going to go and do something else that's a bit more fun right now. So yeah, it was like kind of get out my own way and just let it happen. And the French thing has been very, very ad hoc, and she hasn't really expressed any real desire to come back to it more than once or twice. It happened a fair bit in Bali when we were surrounded by a bit of French. But since we've not been surrounded by French, it's sort of not on her horizon. So I'm just leaving it and let it come back up on its natural course. So anyway, again, I've probably gone a bit longer than I expected to. So that is our interpretation of child-led and play-led learning at the moment, and a few of our experiences. Very keen to hear your own experiences. What are you trying? How's it working for you? Yeah, so if you come across this, please leave a comment, and we'll look forward to getting to know you. In the meantime, it's Colin Clapp from Parenting Passports and Profits, over and out from Hoi An in Vietnam. Until next time, take care now. Bye-bye.